is all about why learning to ride feels so hard and how to make it easier. Because I know when I started learning just how challenging it was, how overwhelming it was, and then when I passed and I came out through the other side and seeing so many people saying the same thing that I was saying and feeling, I just thought, do you know what? I'm in a really good position that I can help people to work on this and help you to maybe just feel a little bit better about the whole experience, because we decide we want to learn how to ride usually because we want to enjoy it, not because we want it to be a long hard struggle and a slog. So yeah, this is all about just trying to make it feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit easier. And it doesn't matter where on your journey you are. This is the same thing. The same things come up. So just a little bit of a disclaimer here to say this is not a substitute for riding instruction. Okay, this is about mindset coaching, supporting your mental and emotional resilience, which can support your practical training, which means that your mind is going to be more receptive to what you learn, and you'll be able to be more relaxed and be able to enjoy the experience a bit more rather than getting extremely stressed about it. So always do seek guidance and tuition from a qualified instructor for your riding skills. I'm not here to tell you about how to ride your bike, although obviously we do have a couple of guests here tonight who will be able to give you a little bit of assistance around that, and I will introduce them in a couple of moments. But obviously, your safety is your responsibility, and that's the key thing to just take away from that. Okay, so before we start, just to say this is a non-judgmental space. No one's here to judge anybody else. It's a place where you are able to obviously, share any questions, any worries, knowing that no one's going to be criticising you for that, because we're all here for the same reason, that, we want to feel better about the whole riding experience. But obviously do please respect each other and each other's opinions. Do please keep your microphones off unless we are in an interactive part of the workshop, simply because obviously a lot of background noise from a lot of people can obviously be a bit distracting. So if we can just make sure your microphones stay off. And please do participate in the chat. I will do my best to keep an eye on it. And obviously when we're doing any interactive sessions, you can certainly use the chat as much as you like. And the chat does get saved so after the session is over. So I will be able to go back and look and see if there's anything that we haven't covered that people have raised, and I'll be able to come back to you. You can keep your camera on, you can turn it off. I really don't mind, whatever you feel most comfortable with. The recording won't show everybody. The recording will show anyone who's speaking, but it won't show everybody else. So there will be some time limited interactive periods for discussion during the workshop, and as I say, it is being recorded, and we will have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, hopefully. We'll just have excuse. So just thinking about where you are now, most people, when they come to me, they're kind of in a position where they want to ride safely and calmly, want to be able to enjoy the freedom, be able to trust themselves, but are really having a struggle. And they might also be preparing for tests and think, well, I've got my Mod 1 coming up, or Mod 2 coming up, or I want to do my CBT, and I'm just dreading it. And that's not really a nice place to be. And obviously you might be saying to yourself over and over again, I can do this, but actually not really believing it. And then you might find that you get the kind of like real nervous system response of like your racing heart rate and your body tensing up and your mind going blank, and you're just questioning, why am I doing this? And you're just maybe not enjoying it like you thought you would. And maybe you're even in a position where you might want to give up. And obviously that's not great, especially if you've had some negative experiences, whether that's been a close shave, or whether something actually has happened, whether you've had an accident or someone else who has. These all challenge our confidence and our self-belief, and our nervous system can then go on really super high alert. And we talked about that in the last workshop. So if you haven't seen the last workshop, I would highly encourage you to go and look at it. So question for you, that I will sort of answer for you, is, can you really achieve your goal of learning how to ride a motorbike to a sufficient standard that you feel safe enough to actually enjoy it? That may be what you're asking yourself if you're in this position where you're struggling with the learning experience. So my answer to you is yes, absolutely you can. And this workshop will show you how. So by the end of the workshop, hopefully you'll be feeling a little bit better about what your next steps could be to enhance your learning experience. Now, I'm not just talking about being a beginner here. I'm talking about people who may be returning to riding after a break, or maybe have got settled in their ways and perhaps want to return to learning because they perhaps think that they developed some habits that they want to kind of overcome. It doesn't matter where you are in your learning journey, this will help you. And not only that, it might help you with learning other things as well. So very quickly, what we covered last time, we talked about how to manage your nerves so you can actually enjoy the ride. And we talked about what happened when your nerves sort of go out above a level that's comfortable, how that can really impact on your riding, what's actually going on with your nervous system to make that happen, and how we get stuck in this fear loop, and that can kind of really hold us back. And we talked about managing risk as a way of reducing and breaking that fear loop and giving you some practical mindset shifts to feel calm, safe and in control. So those things are really important to take into this. So if you haven't watched the previous workshop, I would highly recommend that you do. This time we are going to be looking at why your brain can struggle to take in new skills when you're learning under pressure. What are the factors that get in the way of your learning? How your nervous system can block the learning and how to calm it down, and practical mindset shifts to help your progress feel smoother and faster. So that's what we're going to be covering. And as I say, this isn't just about learning how to ride a motorbike. This can help you with learning anything. I'm a bit joined tonight already by Lisa and Colin, who are riding coaches from RideWise Pro. And I'm going to let them obviously tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do in a little while when we get to the appropriate point in the workshop. But they are going to be telling you about advanced training and are here to answer any burning questions you might have. And as I said earlier, if we don't get through all of the questions in the workshop, we will make sure that they get followed up. So look out for that. So what this workshop is not is motorcycle training or instruction, but I would say you can never have enough good quality training, and I know that Colin and Lisa would agree with me on that. What this workshop is training on managing your mind and your nervous system so that you can get the best out of your learning and practice. So all the time and money that you've invested in your training, or perhaps are continuing to invest in your training, you want to make the most of it by being ready and open for that learning, rather than it kind of all getting stuck in your brain because you're uptight and can't relax. And as I say, this can be applied to any learning at all. So a little bit about me. I'm not going to talk lots about me, but just to kind of give you the sort of the background as to who am I to be able to kind of give you some support with this. So my career, I've had a long career in the public sector, mostly as an NHS senior manager, but I also have worked as a firefighter and as a prison officer. I currently work and have worked for the last 5.5 years running my own business as a mindset coach, and I also have additional qualifications in teaching and personal training, so I very much understand the learning process. I'm also a marathon runner, and I also started riding a motorcycle 2 years ago when I turned 50, and I found it really hard. So I have been through, and I'm still learning, I believe we never stop learning. And so I very much know what it feels like, and I also understand the importance of building a resilient mindset. So I want to help you to feel more comfortable about your learning too. And you can follow me on Instagram if you want to see my personal journey, or also follow my tips on Instagram. Okay, so let's just hear from you for a minute in the chat or on camera, whatever you prefer. When it comes to learning to ride at any stage, what do you think are the biggest struggles that you have? And I just want to say, please really try and focus in on yourself rather than perhaps other people, or whether that be friends, family, instructors or whatever, because this is really about how we respond to those things. So if anybody has anything they would like to share either in the chat or on camera about what they struggle with the learning. Anybody got anything they'd like to share? Just keeping an eye on the chat. Confidence and ability. Yeah, it's about that trust, isn't it? With, the two have to go together. You have to know what to do, but you also have to trust that you are going to be able to do it when it matters. ADHD and menopause and being 50, yeah. bad past experience, lack of confidence after a minor off, translating instruction into action. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Getting to the bottom of the road, I'm fine after that. Yes, absolutely. It's that little warm-up time we need, isn't it? Not had a bike for a while. Yeah, and obviously having a break, we do get rusty. Even people who've been riding for like 30 odd years tell me that, they have a few weeks off and it feels weird getting back on. So many things, how important it is for own self-worth to pass. Yes, and pressure we put ourselves on. Absolutely. We do, I think, put so much pressure on ourselves. Yeah, being watched. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Local roads are different. Yeah, and that's it, is really when you know your own roads and when you don't know the roads, that can really impact on confidence. Feeling judged, absolutely, that is a big one, and I'll be talking about that in a little while. Brilliant. Anybody else before we move on? Pressure for perfection, training for advanced tests. Yes, yeah, I'm sure Colin and Lisa will be able to help you with that one, because that is, I think, something that a lot of people struggle with. So brilliant. Well, I think there's quite a good range of answers there, but I think the themes are all quite similar in terms of it's that kind of trust in yourself, trust in the process, trust in your bike, and all of the environment and other kind of impacting factors which we will be looking at. So thank you. Okay. So learning to ride at any stage, what do we go through? So obviously, we have the formal instruction, which is, obviously we start with our CBT. Those of us who, I think, can't remember what year the CBT came in, but it's obviously a relatively recent thing. And then we have mod 1 and mod 2. Obviously, depending where you're at in sort of like age range. But obviously over 24s, it's the full license. Might be returning to riding, might be doing some refreshers, might be doing some advanced training, and obviously there's lots of options out there now, which is great. And obviously Colin and Lisa will be telling us a bit more about that in a little while. Obviously regular practice is absolutely essential for developing our skills, because if we don't practice, we don't get better. It's the same with anything. Obviously there's the theory side of things. We've got to obviously know the highway code and hazard awareness, and we'll get tested on that as part of our learning. There's loads and loads of online resources out there, including social media. And there's obviously government resources. There's resources from training providers and lots of YouTube videos. And there's also a lot of information in the Police Motorcycle Roadcraft Handbook, which I've obviously given a picture of there, which is a really useful resource. And it does also have a bit of a section in human factors and how being a human can, the fact that we naturally will make mistakes, and how we're feeling at any given time can really impact on how we ride. But it doesn't really go into much detail about, or none of the resources really, in my view, go into an awful lot of detail about how do you manage yourself? How do you manage yourself and your learning? Because that part, coupled with everything else, is what will help you to be the best rider you possibly can. And if that part of you isn't as functioning as well as it could be because of your nerves, and because of perhaps how you are talking to yourself about your own abilities, that's going to really hold you back. So that's the things that we need to work on, and that's my space that I cover. So that's what I'm going to be looking at tonight with you. Last time we talked about risk assessment, and that's such a big part of managing, being a safe rider is managing the risk to yourself. So we looked at making sure you're getting good quality basic training and advanced training. We looked at making sure that you're, being sensible about how you approach your practice. So you're not just trying to do the hardest things straight away, that you're building up to them, building up your trust and confidence in yourself. We looked at obviously the importance of having protective gear, because again, that can, although, no amount of gear is going to, be completely safe, it will reduce the impact of certain risks. Obviously, looking after your bike is really important, because that is, what you're riding. And obviously managing your mindset and your nervous system, and getting sufficient training is such an important part of this whole process of being safe, managing risk. But if you're struggling with the learning, it's going to be harder than it needs to be. So But why is this? So learning to ride for some of us isn't just hard. It's actually really, really overwhelming. And certainly my experience was trying to do my whole CBT in a single day was just way too much for my brain. I had to break it down into several sessions. Not most people don't need quite as much as I did, but it is a lot to take in one day for a lot of people. And then obviously we have our module 1 and module 2 training over a few days typically. So of course, if you're trying to go into this and you don't feel ready, your nervous system is going to be on high alert. And if someone's saying you just need to relax, that's really surface level. It's not actually going to do anything underneath. It's not going to help you to trust yourself. So the important thing, I think, is to recognise what is the problem here. And actually, when you look at how learning to ride compares with learning to drive, it's such a different level of input that goes into it. So, you do your CBT in a day, if you follow the standard format, and then you're out on your own. And then you do mod 1 and mod 2 in the standard format in a few days, and then you're out on your own. And yet, on a motorcycle, the risk is so much greater than in a car. And yet we have driving lessons of 1 to 2 hours at a time, typically. And the average person, according to the DVLA, the average person learning to drive has 45 hours of lessons and 22 hours of practice. And yet on a motorbike, we get a fraction of that, which is all the more reason why taking more lessons, more training after you've passed your test, I think is absolutely vital in terms of being able to trust yourself and be as safe as you can be, bearing in mind the risks that we talked about in the last session. So it's no wonder that we get overwhelmed when we're trying to take all of this information in a short space of time, and we don't have the time and the opportunity to let it embed before we're getting out there in traffic, on roads in different weather conditions and all of those things. It takes time to build up that trust and confidence in ourselves. We've got to give ourselves that time. And even if we've already learned how to drive, it's still a big ask. I mean, I drove, it took me 9 months to learn how to drive 33 years ago, and then I started learning how to ride a motorbike. And yes, it did help that I knew how to drive, but it still took me quite a long time to learn how to ride. Not as long as 9 months, thankfully, but it did take me longer than average. And I think, I was able to recognise that actually that was what I needed, and I was going to make sure I got what I needed. And as a result, I'm now feeling much better about it all. So that's what we're up against, really. So it's no wonder if you're struggling that you're finding it hard. You're not the only one, I can tell you that now. Because riding isn't just physical, it's actually psychological and emotional as well. And we're not just learning to control a machine. What we're actually trying to do is rewire our brain to feel safe doing something that our nervous system knows is fundamentally a high risk activity. So it's a bit of a conflict. We weren't ever supposed to travel at the speeds that we travel on a motorbike. Our brains aren't designed for that. So, of course, if you are one of the many people who is struggling with, I really want to ride, but I'm terrified, you're not alone. And that's the reason why. And this is what we have to try and work on in order to feel safe enough to do it safely. So why we struggle to learn, it's not a confidence flaw. There's nothing wrong with you. It's actually just your natural response to ensure your safety. Your nervous system is there to ensure your survival. And it knows that you're about to get on a motorbike and it could go wrong and you could hurt yourself. And obviously learning to ride involves taking in a hell of a lot of information in a really short space of time under that level of stress of I might hurt myself. Yeah. And of course, if you are feeling really anxious, your brain is going to be putting you into survival mode, and that shuts down the higher brain functions, the functions of our brain where the cognitive processes happen that enable us to think clearly. And so we move into that fight or flight, and that creates those physical reactions. So everything stiffens up, and if your shoulders are up around your ears and your arms are stiff, it increases the likelihood of something happening. So we end up in this fear loop that I talked about last time. So if your brain and your nervous system are thinking you're in severe danger, which they may well be, then your brain is not going to be focused on remembering which gear to go up or down, because that was a big problem for me. Like, which way do I go? Making sure I'm putting myself in the right gear. And then you end up doing something instinctive, like grabbing the front brake. It took me a long time to train myself out of grabbing the front brake, because that was such an instinctive fear reaction for me. And it goes back to my childhood, riding a bike and going over the handlebars, which I did a few times. And not only that, we're not just afraid of the physical safety aspect of it. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of messing up in front of in front of others and being judged. And obviously, I know that that's come up in the chat. Just keeping an eye on. Yeah, did really well on advanced lessons, but couldn't pass the test. Yeah, and again, you know, you're not the only one, Naomi. So these are all natural human fears. You know, think, why would I be worried about messing up in front of somebody else? What's the big deal there? Now, logically, that doesn't sound like a big deal, does it? You think, well, you know, surely getting hurt is a much more severe consequence than someone laughing at me. But as far as your primitive brain is concerned, that's just as important as your physical safety, because it's all about being accepted and belonging. That's a primitive need that we have as being human, is to be accepted by others. And if we think someone's laughing at us, we might get cast out. You know, from our survival instincts, that's really a big deal. So yeah, it's important to remember that that's also going on under the surface. Now, I'm going to take you through a model that will help you to start thinking a little bit differently about the learning process, which hopefully will just give you a little bit of a different perspective and make you feel a little bit better about actually where you are. Level 0 is your nervous system basically taking over. There's no thinking involved. There's no cognitive process involved. It is just animal instincts, like keeping yourself safe, or trying to. And of course, the problem is that the reactions we have actually don't keep us safe. So our nervous system is not really helping. So we don't really want to be staying there. We want to be able to move ourselves out of that level 0. And so when we go for our training, whatever training that might be, whether it is CBT, module 1, module 2, advanced training, we're at the level 1 level of learning, which is the skill acquisition. We are learning how to do the thing. Now, level 2 is the next level up from that, which is where we're actually starting to understand our own learning needs and being able to continue to develop our skills. And then level 3 is kind of like the identity level of learning, where we actually become really competent. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. And most riding instruction, as I say, focuses on level 1. But when we panic, we're going to be reverting back to level 0, where we actually are not thinking clearly. And the mindset work that I do, and what you're learning about tonight, and what you can read about on my website and my articles and what have you, is supporting level 2 and level 3, where you become the rider that you really want to be. So if you are believing that you're not a natural rider, that you're never going to get it, that's a level 3 pattern that needs to be worked on in order for you to become that rider that you are training to be. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So just to give you a little bit more detail on this. So level 0 is the reaction level, where you may be feeling like you're panicking. So it's pure survival mode. There's no thinking involved, and you are ready to fight, flight, freeze or fawn. So if you remember from the last workshop, we talked about running from the bear. So that is, you know, your nervous system. Our ancestors would have been gearing up to do something really physical. And of course, on a bike, although it's a physical activity, we need to be relaxed, and we don't want to be all stiff. So our bodies take over. That's when we get rapid heart rate, shaky legs, blank mind, nausea, etc. And then all the overthinking comes in, because we're trying to get that control. And then, of course, we end up in this loop where we're criticising ourselves and we're questioning everything. And then our confidence drops through the floor. And then, of course, we're far more likely to make another mistake. And then round and round we go. And then we may feel like, that's it, what's the point? I'm giving up, because this is just too hard. I don't like it. I'm never going to get there. So we can get stuck there. Vicky, I feel like the learning of new skills is an ability to need to be practiced, and I feel like I'm out of practice. So my ability to learn is rusty. Exactly. We get stuck in this cycle. So hopefully tonight this will help you to break out of that a little bit. So level 1, skill acquisition. So this is the doing stage. So this is where we're actually actively learning the skills, which is great. And you learn that, you know, how to do all of the stuff. And there's lots of conscious effort and repetition. If you think, how do we learn anything? It's through conscious effort and repetition. And I think most of you here tonight will have at some point in your childhood learnt your times tables. If you can remember how you learnt them, it was lots and lots of repetition to build up those pathways in the brain. And there will be certain ones that you probably have never forgotten, especially the ones maybe that you had to work the hardest at because you struggled with the most. They're the ones that will have stuck the longest because you had to work harder on them. So it's the same with learning anything. We have to keep repeating it, which is why when we avoid the practice, we feel like we go back to square one. So it's a bit like snakes and ladders board. You want to kind of move up the board, but if you have periods of time where you don't practice, you might fall down, especially if you have a little bit of a wobble about something. Mistakes are normal. That's how we learn. We have to learn through mistakes, and I'll come back to that in a little while. But of course, it's really hard to learn if your nervous system is on edge and worrying if you're going to hurt yourself or if someone's going to laugh at you. So we have to be mindful of that. Level 2, this is learning how you learn. So this is where you're raising your awareness and you start to notice the patterns and you reflect on things. You might want to keep a journal of your learning and, what things went well and what things are you perhaps still struggling with, and perhaps learning how different factors affect your performance. And the more you're aware of that, the more able you are to do something about it. And this is where you can actually start taking ownership and control of your learning and work with, instructors or go out with other riders where you can practice and work on the things that you need to enhance. And then finally, the level 3, which is where you're becoming the rider that you actually really, really want to be. So you're not no longer saying, I'm not natural at this, to actually, I'm confident, I'm safe, I'm capable. So you're riding with the bear, as we talked about in the last workshop. You're not running away from it because you're respecting the risks and you're taking control of yourself to manage them, and you're building your competence and confidence, and you're trusting yourself all of the time. And obviously mindset work, whether that's with me or whether it's doing it on your own, just kind of practicing some of the things that I've been talking about, that's going to really help you to reach that level 3. And what it can look like on the bike if it's kind of not going very well is, you might be trying to do a U-turn, but you just can't get your body to coordinate enough to make it happen because you're too stiff and things aren't quite running the way they should. Or you might be doing everything absolutely fine in training, and as soon as you turn up to do your test, it all goes to pieces. It may be that manoeuvres that you were doing quite easily suddenly have started to become more difficult because you maybe had an incident or an accident and your mind is kind of replaying it, and your nervous system no longer trusts that you know what to do, or it doesn't trust that anybody else is going to be doing what they need to be doing around you. It'd be perhaps much more on high alert. So you might be caught in level 0 and your brain can't then access level 1, which is the skills. And without understanding your level 2, it's easy to stay stuck and never reach level 3. So by working on level 2 and by managing your nervous system to get out of level 0 and working on level 1 to actually do the thing, you can reach level 3. Okay, and of course, it's not just our nervous system that's at play here. There are so many other things that affect how we ride. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these. When you get the replay and when you get the slides through, you can obviously look at this in more detail. And I've given some links at the end of the slides so that you can follow up on any of the things that are listed here. But obviously stress, how we feel at any given time, if we're dealing with a lot of stuff that's overwhelming us and we're trying to learn on top of that, that's going to really impact. And not only that, if we're bringing in sort of past traumatic experiences that are heightening our nervous system response already, that's going to really impact. Obviously, physical and mental health conditions are going to be at play as well. But one of the things that I hear time and time again, and have had some personal experience with as well, is menopause. It affects different people in different ways, but one of the biggest things is raised anxiety and brain fog, both of which are obviously going to affect your cognitive functioning when you're trying to learn anything. And obviously if your nervous system is also on high alert because it's a bit risky activity, then you can see how these things start compounding. And ADHD and autism and other cognitive factors, which actually require, a more flexible approach to training, because things like hyperfocus or sensory differences or rejection sensitivities, that's, not being able to feel comfortable with being told how to do things differently, or perhaps, emotional dysregulation where, you don't really know sort of, how to manage the instruction or the criticism that you might receive as a natural part of learning. So we have to be told what we're not doing well, as well as be able to be told what we need to do, because that's how we improve. And certain things can really help and hinder how we respond to that. So it is important that whoever's training anyone who has ADHD or autism has an understanding of those issues, so that they can provide the right level of training and support. And that comes up a lot with the things that I read and with what people say to me. So it is important to remember that obviously one size does not fit all. And obviously what we believe about ourselves has a big impact. So if we're going into it going, I can't do it, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's important that we are going into it with a positive can-do attitude, as opposed to a can't-do attitude. And the emotional experience of learning is really tough, and we'll come on to that in a little while. But being aware of the factors that are impacting your learning can be a really big help in understanding what you need to do about them. But if we're not aware of them, then it's easy to kind of blame ourselves and think we're not good enough, when in actual fact that's not true at all. So knowing your learning style can be really, really handy. So there is this model called VARK, which is stands for visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic, which is basically the observing. So you might find that you learn best when you watch somebody, or you might find that you learn best when you listen to someone talking and reading instructions. You might find that you learn best when you read about something, or you might find that you learn best while doing something, or it might be a combination. And when it comes to riding, of course, you can't get away from the fact that you've got to do it. So you have to learn kinesthetically on the bike. But obviously, if your preferred style is one of the others, it's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So this is where knowing that, what your own learning style is, means that when you're doing the kinesthetic learning on the bike, you also know what other options there are for you that will help you. So for example, if you're a visual person, watching lots of videos on YouTube might well be the thing that you need to do. If you find that you like to read books on it, then maybe reading a handbook like the police motorcycle roadcraft guide might be the thing for you. But when you know what you need, it becomes easier to access those things that can help you. So do you know what your learning style is? There is this questionnaire. It's free. They obviously do have one where you can pay and get more details, but the free one, you don't even have to put any details in. It gives you your results on the screen, which is quite handy. So I would highly recommend you have a go, because it will give you a little bit of insight into what resources you might be able to use that will enhance your learning experience and just make it feel a little bit more comfortable. Does anybody already know what their learning style is? Has anyone come across this before? Well, if you do the quiz at any point, let me know. Let me know how you get on with it. Oh, we've got a new one. Definitely the doing. Yeah, I am. And I'm really visual. I need to see someone do it, and then I need to be able to copy them. I can't, it's not good enough for me to be just told what to do and go and have a go. I have to watch it. I have to see it. I have to have the evidence that it can be done before I can then do it. And that's so important to me. I haven't done it, but I'm the watching and doing. Yeah. And when you know that, it really does help to be able to get the right help. So where are we? Okay. And the other thing that we kind of really gets in the way, I think, sometimes of our performance when we're learning, and I think this has come up a little bit in the chat, is what others are thinking, and also what we're thinking about what others are thinking, and also what we're thinking about ourselves and our own abilities. And what I would say here is perspective is everything. I'm sure you've all seen pictures where there's like pictures taken from different angles, and you see different things according to whatever angle was taken. I remember there was one I saw in the news which looked like Prince William was sticking two fingers up to somebody, when in actual fact he wasn't. It was just that only those two fingers were visible from that angle, whereas the actual reality was he was holding his whole hand up. So it's those kinds of things. We can assume things when we don't have the full information. So someone might be watching you and be going, and you might be thinking, oh God, they're just waiting for me to drop my bike. Whereas in actual fact, they might be full of admiration for you doing something really difficult, but you're putting your own interpretation on what they're thinking. You don't actually know what they're thinking. So it's important to kind of, keep things in perspective. The limiting beliefs we all hold, we all tell ourselves stories about things, and there's usually evidence at some point in the past that has kind of led us to think those things. But what we tend to do is something called cognitive bias, where we just keep finding evidence for that thing that we believe, and we ignore all of the other evidence that points to the contrary. So we might be just focusing on the time we can't do something and forget about the 99 times that we did it well. And those are the things that we need to try and flip the perspective on. And saying, oh, we'll never get there becomes true. Because if you think you're never going to get there, you won't be putting the effort in that you will if you believe that you can. And that's a massive, massive point to remember. Helen, someone once told me, why do I think that I am that important that everyone is thinking, watching, judging me? They're too busy thinking about themselves. Absolutely. Absolutely. We all do that. And that's the thing, is just focus on yourself. Focus on what you're doing and don't worry about what anyone else is doing, because actually nobody cares as much as you do about what you're doing. So that's a really, really important point to remember. Thank you, Helen. Okay. So we want to look for the evidence that counteracts those limiting beliefs. And those are things that, when we write those down, when we journal about them, when we maybe gather evidence. I love to capture the videos from my riding and then watch them back, because it reminds me that actually I can ride perhaps better than I think I can sometimes, which is really helpful. And I like to watch my videos back to see where I think I did things well and where are the ways that I can improve. But I always trying to be objective rather than focus in on just the things that I could have done better. The journey of learning is emotional, okay? And I see this all the time on Facebook, how much people take it to heart, and understandably so. And it was the same for me. There's so much invested in learning to ride, because most of us, as I said earlier, although obviously some people learn to ride because they want to get from A to B, many people learn to ride because they want to enjoy it, and then they find that they go through it and they feel terrible. Amelia, in the Valley of Despair, yes, absolutely. So we start off when all full of excitement when we decide to learn to ride, and I know I was absolutely full of it and turned up to my first introductory ride. I think I spoke about this at the last workshop, so I won't go into detail, but I was all really excited, and then had a terrible time, and I was straight into the Valley of Despair within like half an hour, thinking, why on earth did I think I could do this? So I had to go through, it was probably 18 months of going through this emotional journey of learning before I kind of came out the other side feeling, do you know what, I'm actually really enjoying this now. And there were so many times that I questioned my sanity and whether or not this was something I really, really wanted to do. But somehow I kept going, which must have meant it was important. So just looking at the comments, Graham, maybe some of us are just not good at certain things. Well, I think that's a point of debate that I'd be happy to have a debate with you about, or perhaps outside of this session, because I'm a firm believer of, we are really good at doing things if we can get all of the factors lined up together. Our brains are incredibly dynamic, and a lot of it comes down to belief in ourselves, and that's the thing that I love to work with people on is overcoming doubts and building belief. Obviously, there's always going to be limitations. So like I love to run. I've been running for nearly 18 years. When I started, I was really not very good. My goal was to get a lot faster, but I got to the point where I knew I'd reached my limit and that I wasn't ever going to be as fast as some of my running friends who can run, sort of 2-3 minutes a mile faster than me. And I'd be looking at them, with, admiration, but also a little bit of, why can't I do that? It's not fair. But knowing that there are physical limitations that mean I will never be able to run as fast as them, but I'm okay with that. But I can still run, I just may not be able to do it as well or as quickly as them. And it's about knowing what's important to you, what do you want to achieve, and working on that, and needing to, make it a priority. And when we do, and our brains adapt to that, we can achieve a lot more than we perhaps think we can. So that's all I would say on that. But we can come back to that, Graham. Naomi, I'd like to be able to edit my bike videos, but don't understand the instructions, which goes back to learning style. Absolutely, it does indeed. Yes. And I struggled a lot with learning how to use my Insta360 editing functions, but now with enough time and practice and patience, I have been able to do a relatively good job, but I'm never going to be one of these pros with it. But then I don't want to be, and that's what it comes down to. It's how much do you want it, I think, a lot of the time. Amelia, I struggle with the variables of riding. You don't know what's around the corner. Absolutely, feel out of control. So I'm going to hand that one over to Colin and Lisa in a little while. Yeah, Insta360 is great, isn't it? That's how I feel on the bike, but never in the car. It's interesting, isn't it? And I wonder, you know, in terms of how we feel, you know, it comes down to the experience. And if we've been driving for a long time, then perhaps some of the fears that we had, that we perhaps have forgotten that we had, are now resurging again when we start learning how to ride. So it's all very interesting. But yeah, so it's recognizing we go through this emotional journey, and that actually there's this thing called the messy middle, which is the same as that valley of despair, or the informed pessimism and the valley of despair, where it's a bit like when you go to, you know, those of you who have perhaps had hair restyling, and you've gone to the hairdresser and you think, oh, I really fancy this new style of haircut, and the hairdresser starts doing the work, and you're looking in the mirror and you're thinking, oh my God, what have I done? This is just going to be an absolute disaster. And then somehow the hairdresser pulls it off and you walk out the hairdresser's feeling amazing. But in that middle bit, you have no trust and confidence that it's actually going to be okay. And that's what happens, I think, with our learning experience at times. And it's just remembering that by keep going, keep practicing, you will get there, as long as you're getting the right support. And then there's the conscious competence model. This is another really useful thing to remember, because again, we can put so much pressure on ourselves around our learning and expect ourselves to be experts when we don't even know how to do the basics. So one of the things that I often say to people is, do you remember your first driving lesson? Do you remember that, you know, I remember mine, it was just sitting in the car and learning how the controls worked. And I think I didn't get out of second gear. There was no way I was going to be going near the motorways for a very long time. And yet that's kind of what we expect ourselves to be able to do when we start learning how to ride a motorbike, is to be able to suddenly get the whole thing straight away. And there's so much to take in. So this model basically explains the stages that we go through when we're learning. So before we've decided that we ever want to learn something, we're in this stage of unconscious incompetence. Once upon a time, you didn't know that you wanted to learn how to ride a motorbike. You might not be able to remember that point, but that will have been that point. So you were unconsciously incompetent because you didn't know what you didn't know. You didn't know that you didn't know how to ride it because it wasn't even on the radar. And then suddenly you decide you want to learn, and you're in the awareness stage, and then suddenly you know that you don't know how to do it. And that's what it feels like, obviously, at the beginning. And this is where we can feel quite nervous and panicky. And then gradually we do the practice, we do the learning, and we become what's called consciously competent. And what this means is that we are having to think about, we can do it, but we're having to think about it constantly. So we're having to think, what gear do I need to be in? Have I turned my indicator off? You know, what do I do when I approach this roundabout? Have I remembered to do my lifesavers? All of those things we're having to consciously think about. And then eventually, when we've had enough practice, some of those things start to become unconsciously happening. So we don't have to be thinking about them, which means we've got more brain space to focus on perhaps doing the more advanced learning. But obviously we need to be very careful that we don't end up in a position of complacency. So, you know, I would argue that, yes, some of the more basic functions, we want to reach the point of unconscious competence, but I would say that for certain things, we don't want to be reaching the point of unconscious competence, because we need to have that awareness around us to be safe. So that's just this is something I will leave to Colin and Lisa to talk about if needed. But that's, I think, you know, an important point to remember is that you are somewhere on this ladder, okay, and I think quite often we expect ourselves to be up here when really we might be somewhere over here, and we need to work here in order to be able to get here, and then to be able to get here, rather than trying to be down here to over here without all of that time and practice. We can't fast forward the process. We have to go through the experience. Another little resource that might be helpful to you. Some of you may have heard of this book called The Chimp Paradox, which is all about mind management. And it is a really brilliant resource in helping you to understand the difference between your primitive brain, which is this bit here on this highly technical drawing, and your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of you that makes you human, this is what sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. Yes, I have that book. I don't know who iPhone is, but yes, I'm glad you have the book. And what it does is it helps you to recognize, is it your primitive brain that's in charge right now, or is it your rational brain? And of course, when it comes to managing our nerves, it's our primitive brain that's in charge, and it's our primitive brain that is the one that's trying to work hard to keep us safe, but actually isn't doing a very good job of it because it's just making us more unsafe. So by learning how to move ourselves out of that primitive brain into our kind of our rational brain, using our prefrontal cortex, which is, let's say, the part of us, the part of our brain that makes us stand out from the rest of the animal kingdom, because we have this wonderful ability to think rationally, but we quite often forget to use it. But when we become more aware of it and we can start to use it, we can start to manage that more primitive part of our brain a lot more easily. So I would highly recommend that you get hold of that, because this will really help you. And there are some driving examples in there. I'm not sure that there are any motorbike examples, but the driving examples are quite useful. So I would definitely recommend getting hold of that. About making mistakes. Okay, we cannot learn anything without making mistakes. It's the mistakes that actually enable us to move forward. However, your nervous system doesn't want to make mistakes, because you're potentially going to be putting yourself at physical risk, and also the risk of failure and people judging you. So your nervous system does not want you to make any mistakes. So you're kind of in this kind of like catch-22 position, because without making the mistakes, you can't progress very well, but you also don't want to be unsafe. So it is extra risky, which is why risk assessment is so important. And going back and looking at the last workshop where I go through a lot of that is going to be really helpful in terms of managing your attitude to making mistakes. But also get extra training, which brings me nicely on to why do advanced training? So I'm going to hand over now to Colin and Lisa from RideWise Pro to just talk to us for a few minutes about training, the importance of training, and obviously continuing to train after you pass your test, and answer any questions that you might have, as many as we have time for. And so over to you, Colin and Lisa.
Cool. Okay. Well, sort of briefly introduce ourselves. So I'm Colin. Lisa's also on the call. So we're both coaches for rideways.pro. So this was born out of, we were all coaches for Bike Safe, so through the police. The Metropolitan Police stopped doing Bike Safe, so we decided that it was such a valuable resource that we would carry on doing it ourselves. So that's where it was born. So all the coaches are either current or ex-police officers or other emergency services that have been trained to an extremely high standard, and we just felt that all that money had been spent on us, and we wanted actually to be able to pass some of that on. I'll leave it onto the chat. If any of you have done Bike Safe, it's sort of a start and an opening the door onto advanced training. It's not a long set day. It's about 2 or 3 hours you get to be observed, but it sort of opens your eyes to what's out there. There are so many advanced training that you can look at. If you look at ROSPA, IEM, people like that, oh, thank you, Kim, that there is lots of groups out there, and we are not going to try and replace IEM or ROSPA. They tend to be large groups, and people go along as a bit of a social and do some training as well. But that can be quite intimidating to go into a big group of people and be that new person and actually try and get some training through that. And that's not for everyone. So we decided that we would do some group training, which tends to be sort of around clubs and people that know each other. But the main point of it will be sort of individual or 2-to-1 training, where we talk to you about what you want, rather than us trying to teach you a strict level 1, level 2, level 3. We will chat to you what you're struggling with. Is it corners, overtakes, whatever? And we will work individually with you and give you some bespoke training. Oh, thank you very much. So a blue, yeah, blue ribbon. There are so many. There's lots of things out there for lots of different, however different people learn. But as I say, not everybody wants to join a club. Not everybody wants to be part of a massive ride out. Some people just want it individually. A couple of things that sort of popped up today about imposter syndrome. So I'll pass over to Lisa briefly on this because she's just done a course at work and just sort of talk through, even as professional riders and drivers, what we have to sort of deal with ourselves as well.
So, as Claire said, my name's Lisa. So I also work part of the police. I've been riding for about 8 years. Started doing my CBT. Did my A2, moving on to Cat A. I've been fortunate enough to be given the highest level of training, both driving and riding. It's very intense riding. You're put under a lot of pressure, and the main aim is to get to where you're going quite safely but quickly. Um, as we all know, it's very challenging. The courses are very challenging, but it's also very like rewarding in what we do. Um, Claire made a very good point as well that you don't get any extra training after the DVLA tests. Um, it's done under strict conditions, which being in the police, it's you're put under a lot of pressure. Um, but a part of Ridewise and going to sorry, going with what Colin said about the imposter syndrome, you put a lot of pressure on yourself, but I think that's normal. But you know, if you do the training under relaxed conditions and with confident people, it can be enjoyable.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
I think
think
imposter syndrome is something that we all struggle with in our own ways. I think, whether that's in riding or other areas in our lives. And I think the key thing to remember about imposter syndrome is that it's normal. Everybody feels it when you're out of your comfort zone and you're doing something that you perhaps don't feel fully competent in yet. Then naturally your nervous system kicks in again because it's trying to keep you safe, and it says don't do that, it's scary, you can't do it, and it's trying to keep you in a keep you contained when actually what you want to do is grow.
yeah,
And
and I think nerves are so normal
mm,
for anyone, just because I've done those intensive courses, same as Colin,
mm,
we've all had to start somewhere.
mm,
Um, I've been riding 8 years, 7, 8 years, but we all started from the beginning. I didn't know how to ride a motorbike. I did my CPT.
mm,
Um, and as I said, I was fortunate enough to join the police and be given those intensive courses where, as I said, you're put under a lot of pressure, but
mm,
not only are you put under a lot of pressure because of the courses you're doing,
mm,
you put a lot of pressure on yourself to pass.
yeah.
Um,
There's
and
a
that makes you,
question from Amelia here. What are your top tips for managing your mindset under pressure? So in that situation, Lisa, what did you have to do to try and stay calm?
all
Uh,
that's a good question.
mm,
Um, I think when something means a lot to you, and for me, especially I work in a lot of male dominated roles.
mm,
So there's a lot of pressure on me to sort of pass these courses.
mm,
So I can appreciate even before joining the police and riding a motorbike, the pressure you can put yourself under. I think just when you ride, just try and enjoy it, take a deep breath and just relax. I think a lot of tension is put through the handlebars,
mm,
and you can feel that, and that can affect your cornering, that can affect your confidence on the bike. So if you just relax the shoulders, relax yourself, just take a deep breath, I think that can make a huge difference. And just taking a minute, even if you're stopped at traffic lights or you have a quick break, coffee break, just think about how that ride went, even if it was 10 minutes, an hour, just take a deep breath, have a little think and think, okay, what could I do better? Or I think just trying to relax is the main thing, and just acknowledging that you need to relax.
mm.
If you tense, it can make things a lot more difficult.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I
I
think from a
totally.
physical point of view, as Lisa just said, spot on that the moment you're gripping the the handlebars with that death grip because of the strain going through it. And it's something we sort of, I've mentioned to Claire when we went out,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just wiggling your fingers,
Mm.
because if you wiggle your fingers, it's impossible to grip the bars
And the
with
thing is,
that death grip.
you often don't even realize you're doing it until someone points it out to you. And I think that's the thing is another sort of benefit of having extra training is having somebody, no matter how long you've been riding, having someone else watching what you're doing can give you a really useful feedback. Because if you don't get to see yourself riding, generally speaking, unless somebody else is watching you. And so I think, just getting some really positive, constructive feedback about like the things that you need to work on, but also the things that you're doing well. I think for that balance, because that's important. Again, with imposter syndrome is you perhaps don't trust in your own abilities. So having somebody else saying, actually, you're doing better than you think, which is what you said to me, Colin. I remember you're doing better than you think you are, because that way, if you're getting some positive feedback as well as the feedback that you need to work on, it can really help to build up that trust in yourself, especially if it's someone that is, a really credible, qualified person, like someone like yourself who knows what they're talking about. And you can say, oh, well, if they think I'm doing all right, I must be doing all right. And then that can let go of some of that pressure.
And
I
yeah, and I
think
think with the DVLA tests, as
Mm,
you mentioned, it's under strict conditions, and
mm,
from that point, whether you've been riding 2 years or 20 years,
mm,
no one actually watches you and tell you how you're doing, as you just said. And people think, oh, if someone's watching me,
mm,
they're going to be negative. That's not necessarily the case. We're there to sort of encourage and coach you
mm,
and get the best out of you.
mm,
Um, and people think they don't need any extra training, but you don't know where you've gone wrong until someone actually has a little look at what you're doing. And you
mm.
might not be doing anything wrong, but there's always room for improvement, whether you're the best rider in the world or you've been riding a couple of weeks.
That's it. I mean, I had a great example from my session with Colin the other week, which was around my head positioning on roundabouts, because I didn't, and on corners, because I didn't realise that although I was looking with my eyes, my head wasn't quite aligning in the way that it could be to make me ride more smoothly. And I didn't know that I was doing that until Colin pointed it out. And I just made a slight movement of my head, and then everything suddenly felt a whole lot easier. And I felt more confident in going around roundabouts and round corners, that if I hadn't had that session, I would still be struggling with that and not quite know why. And now I know why. And now I can work on it and continue to make sure that I'm doing those things more consistently. And if things start to feel a bit off, or I think, well, either I've relapsed in what I was doing and maybe I need to correct that again, or go and get another session, have another refresher, and tell me what I'm doing, because I think that's so important, because we are so much more at risk than if we're in the car. And we know, driving standards, on that brilliant, generally speaking, across the country, or even the world. So we are at risk. So the more we can do to keep ourselves safe, training is just such a crucial component. I'm just looking and see the comments. Yeah, wiggle my fingers, quite like it. Deborah, I went to a group briefing session to find myself surrounded by young men on big bikes. I felt so out of place, but the guys were sharing concerns exactly like mine, cornering, etc., and seemed as anxious as I was. Yeah, and I think this is the thing. It's a lot of people are worrying about this, but they're not maybe knowing that there's somewhere they can go to talk about it. And I think it's great that people are finding that they can do that.
I
Um,
think just briefly, because I know the time you're losing time with it, but the motorcycling is a depleting skill. The less you do it because you're worried about doing it, the more difficult it is to go and do it on that first day again. So that is completely normal. When you have that month off or whatever from riding, you go back, it's completely normal. The second thing I was saying is mainly about being judged. As I think somebody quoted about, say nobody else cares. When we ride as a big pack, when we're at work or we're riding as friends, the person at the front will often think that everybody's watching me. The rest of the bikes are normally just thinking, "Oh, I wish you'd hurry up because I'm desperate for a cup of coffee or whatever." People are so tied up in their own world. Do not worry what other people are thinking about. They will be having the same pressures, the same doubts that you are having. And there is very rare, although there are people out there that have that amount of self-confidence, but generally that everybody will have that same imposter syndrome, self-doubt, worry about what people are looking at. But actually just enjoy it. It's a great thing to be able to do. And whether you come with us or whoever you go to, just get good training. Don't trust Bill from down the pub who tells you used to ride 50 years ago. Loads of stuff online, but again, just be careful who you trust. And yeah, just go with somebody reputable.
Yeah.
I mean, we all think it. Even, when us coaches go for a ride just as friends, we when we stop for a coffee or whatever that may be, we'll say, "Oh, did you see when I did this, or did you see when I did that?" Most of the time, no, because
Mm.
you're focusing on your own ride, and we're not, you naturally overthink and you worry what people think of anything or your riding in particular. But it's not the case, as Colin just said, you're thinking about your own things. It's easy to sort of overthink it, but just don't worry. I think the more you worry about it, it's easy to say, I know, but the more you worry, the more you're going to tense up, the more you're going to overthink it, and the more more likely you are to make mistakes.
Exactly
But
that.
if you just relax and try not to worry what people think, easy to do or easy to say even, then I think it would naturally flow a bit better.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and that's certainly been my experience. So, well, thank you, Colin and Lisa, for coming along and giving us a few tips and a bit of information about what you do, and also, what else is out there. There will be links in the slides if you do want to find out a bit more from Colin and Lisa about what they do, and perhaps make an inquiry. And do have a read of the article that I shared. I will share it again after when I send the link out for the replay of my advanced riding day with Colin that I did at the end of September, which I thoroughly enjoyed and would highly recommend. Just seeing Lee's comment, would like to do this, been riding 35 years or so, must have picked up loads of bad habits. I wouldn't like to comment on whether you have or you're not, but what I would say is, yeah, have it, do a day, just give it a go and see what you think, and go from there. You don't have to take the advice that's given, and you might find that actually you're doing really well. So it should be a good confidence boost. So I think that's all the comments that we've had. Sorry, I need to drop off. Yeah, Amelia's had to go, and iPhone has said need to drop off now. And oh, check your shoulders aren't hunched up high and tense. Yeah, that's what I find I do. And I think, oh, put my shoulders down, and then everything feels so much easier. Ordered the book, brilliant, lovely. So I'm just going to move on because I know we're conscious of time. So just to finish off, what can you do to make your learning feel easier? Okay, so there's a number of things that you can do. First of all is understanding your needs and what your learning level is, where you feel you're at on that ladder, and what your learning style is, and what capacity you have currently got for learning. Because obviously, if you've got a huge amount of stress going on in your life, that's going to reduce your capacity available for learning. So it is about picking your timing and what have you, and just being aware of your own needs. Obviously, working with a training provider who can then meet those needs, and obviously there is that temptation to go for the cheapest ones out there, but obviously, if you do your homework and you go by recommendations and you speak to some training providers and talk to them about what you need, a good training provider will meet you where you're at and will give you what you need. And that certainly was my experience. And it's about having that conversation. And if you know what your needs are, you can have that conversation more confidently. Obviously, getting regular refreshers if you have passed your test. And I say I do know a couple of good trainers who I can recommend. Work on managing your chimp brain. Okay, get hold of that book and have a read of it, because honestly, it really will help you to recognize what you're feeling and then give you tools to do something about it. Challenge those limiting beliefs. So every time you hear yourself, yes, but, or I can't, actually stop and notice that and challenge it, and perhaps see how you can rewrite the story so that you are looking at it from a glass half full rather than a glass half empty perspective, which is very, very powerful. Managing the risks, which we talked about last time, and managing your nervous system. So just a couple of comments on managing your nervous system. Obviously, the flight or fight part of our nervous system is the one that's responsible for our survival instincts, which is why we feel the way we do, because we're ready, geared up to fight or flight. We want to be more in the rest and digest, the calm and restorative part of our nervous system when we're trying to learn, because that's when we can actually think clearly. Obviously, we don't want to be so relaxed that we're laid back and not concentrating, but we need to have some level of alertness, but we need to be you know, it needs to be manageable. And we can move from fight or flight to rest and digest by just slowing down our breathing, dropping our shoulders, and just saying calm words out loud to ourselves. It's really amazing. I trained as a hypnotherapist, and the power of my hypnotherapy voice when I put it on, it's very relaxing to my clients, and I also find it actually relaxes me as I'm talking, as I'm delivering hypnotherapy. I start to feel really calm and relaxed because my voice is calm and relaxed. And it's that can't be underestimated, just how powerful that can be, just using your own voice to yourself. I even spoke out loud to myself on my mod 1 as I was going through all the exercises, and honestly that made such a difference to my heart rate and my level of nerves throughout the test. Things like tapping, self-havening, meditation and hypnotherapy are techniques that can help, obviously, when you're not on the bike. And there are various resources out there, so I can point you in the direction of those, and I can actually do hypnotherapy. So if that's something you're thinking about, do let me know. Do remember that your body needs a warm-up on the bike, just like you would go to the gym, you'd do a warm-up, or before you went out for a run, you might do a warm-up, or any other exercise for that matter. You've got to give your mind and body the chance to connect with each other before you kind of do the most difficult parts of your ride. And I've got loads of articles on my website, so do take a look at that, and I've put some links at the end. So if you do need any more support, there is a whole list of things that you can get for free from me, and there are also some things that you can get from me where you would obviously need to invest, but it really depends on what you need as to what would be the most appropriate thing. I do have an offer at the moment where I'm a sponsor for the Bristol Biking Girls calendar, and I'm basically giving 50% off my coaching at the moment for anyone who buys a calendar before the 31st of December or before they sell out. And you need to obviously provide me with a proof of purchase. There are limited places, but that is an offer that I've got on at the moment, which is really, really super value. And obviously you've got the link there for RideWise Pro as well. So just very briefly about my package, basically what we go through is obviously understanding what's behind how you're feeling at the moment, how to manage your nervous system, building up your self-belief, and obviously using hypnotherapy if that's deemed appropriate for what you need. So recommended resources. All of these are hyperlinks, so when you get the slides, you can click on any of them and it will take you through to the relevant resources. I would highly recommend, a lot of people don't talk about this enough, but the Safe Driving for Life government resources, the theory test practice is the best one that I found. And you have to pay on a subscription, but you only pay for as long as you need, and then you can end it. But it is really good. It's the most realistic compared to all the other apps out there. So do spread the word about it if you know anyone who's looking for a theory test app. And they do a pre-CBT ride-free online course, which is pretty good as well. And then you've got the link to the VARC learning styles, the conscious competence model, and all my articles on my website as well, where you can read about my day with Colin. And that is it. Are there any final questions before we finish? I know a few people had to go, but obviously if you think of anything afterwards and you want to get in touch, then obviously just give me a shout. If you're in the Facebook group, then obviously you can ask your questions in there, or you can send me an email, and I will be letting you know what the next one is going to be. So we'll be having another workshop at the end of November, and at the moment I've got a feeling it all depends on whether my guest that I want to bring along is available, but it's going to be about how the gear that you're wearing, obviously your helmet, your gloves, your boots, your trousers, everything, how wearing the right gear can have how that can impact on your mindset for riding. So we'll have a bit of a discussion about that next time.